Hello, and welcome to Walk Off the Bike Path. My name is Joe Galliette. I'm your host. And this show is all about finding things off the bike path that are interesting. And I would like to bring them to light. But my first two shows were with a gentleman I found very, very interesting and with a lofty goal. And so until we get the series on him completed, I'm going to stay with it and bring him to or through a few more episodes. Anyway, and today we continue with another episode in my series of Press a Tour with Dr. Picciano. Dr. Paul Picciano is highly educated and a determined man who holds a PhD in neurobiology. He has founded the Center for Neurofunctional Restoration Incorporated. It's a 501c3 charitable organization dedicated to research, training, and education in the field of neurology. He has dedicated many of his years to research as it pertains to cancer and the relationship between body and mind. He is the owner and founder of Pressator Group, the Pressator Group. It's an LLC. It's an extraordinary group of people in conjunction with Paul to address issues that are overlooked by our current health and education system. There are many divisions to Pressator, which I will go into in another point in time, but he covers a gambit of things, and he's looking to take it worldwide. And I can go on and on about his credentials, and no, the man doesn't sleep. And I can attest to that because anytime I call him, he's wide awake. Anyway, Paul has worked his entire life with people, young and old, who have a myriad of conditions that equate to not fitting into the mainstream society. These include, but are not limited to, inmates incarcerated for many different reasons, kids with ADD and ADHD, people with PTSD, kids who don't learn well in the current education system, people in recovery from injuries like burns, strokes, and amputations, and kids with autism. This segment we're going to be exploring his work with autism. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's really great to be back here.
When I was preparing questions for this particular segment of the show, I was in line with a person having coffee, and a young woman, I asked, does she have anybody in her family that has autism? And she said no. I said, do you have any dealings with people with autism? She goes, no, but I used to work in the mall. And once in a while, people would come in that had autism, and they would come in, and clearly they were people who had something different going on and disturbed a lot of people. And in disturbing them, the other people wanted me to do something about it. And I really didn't know what else to do except to be patient with them and being kind. I said, so is there a question that you might have if you could ask a professional, a person, an expert in this subject? And she said, well, she couldn't come up with one. And I suspect a lot of our viewers are not here truly understanding autism and what it is. So my first question to you, obviously, is who is the autistic child? What do they look like? What do they do that makes them obviously autistic?
Well, first of all, the autistic child is a child. And more specifically, they're just any other human being. I find that they're fully cognizant of a bunch of things. Their mind is going, but they can't express themselves. And because they have no real interactive relationship with their environment, a lot of times they can't process things. So they live in their head. When I see a child with a dysfunctional disorder. And I don't like to call it disabilities because, quite frankly, people are capable of all sorts of things once you show them the path, take them by the hand, step by step, bring them along that path. I find this through experience that these children are just everybody. They have feelings, they have likes, they have dislikes, they have frustrations. And a lot of times they have quirky behavior because they've not really had the development that every other child has had. So as a result, they express themselves, maybe a frustration or a feeling, in strange ways. Strange to us, not to them. It's just what they do. So who are they? Well, in most cases, they're, I find, just me or you. They just haven't had the background experientially that we've had.
Tell me the difference between Asperger's and autism. Is there a difference?
No, it used to be that they had Asperger's, then they had autism, and they had, various types of personality disorders. But now they're just talking, because a lot of these things tend to be symptomatic in terms of category. But now they really talk about the autism spectrum, where you have variations of behavior along the way. You do find, though, that the one category that works, or the number of categories that work, high functional, moderately functional, and very low functional. The big question is, why are some low? Why are some high? Why are some moderately functional? And in my personal feeling, autism is a developmental issue rather than a pathology. And as a result, some people haven't developed as far as others, so they're less functional. If you were to compare an autistic child next to an infant, perhaps other than the size of that child, you wouldn't see too much more, or less capacity in the infant or these individuals. It's just that he had a little bit more experience at not being functional than the infant has. And the infant's going to grow into functionality, whereas a lot of times the child who's autistic is just sort of stuck there.
I know you've worked with blind people as well. Is there a connection or a similarity between what you're talking about with a blind person and with a person with autism?
Yeah, I think in terms of function, it's interesting you bring up, because my personal feeling is that autism is the flip side of being visually impaired. Visually impaired can't bring information in, and they sort of are neutral in their head. They're very uncertain. They're, struggling to figure out, what happens, how do I get here or there, what happens if something's in my way, and so on. They can't see. But if you take a look at someone who's autistic, they can see. It's just they can't do anything with it. They can't then express themselves, where someone who is visually impaired can express themselves. It's just that they can't maneuver in their environment. So their environmental awareness is not good. With a child who's autistic, their environmental awareness is good. It's just that they can't do anything about it because, for example, they may not know vocabulary because they haven't built up a vocabulary. You can't form a thought without vocabulary. Have a thought run through your head without words. Would it be an impression? Would it be an emotion? Would it be a fear? So as a result, they really can't do anything about processing what they see. They can't formulate thought in the way we would. And of course, who knows really what they can do. And then, if they even did, how do they communicate? Because a lot of them spend more time within their head than focused outwardly to the people around them and the individuals, the environment around them.
Well, there's already a number of well-meaning organizations that address autism. And what makes your system different, and what makes it better, or makes it something that you want to pursue in a what is it that you do that's different? Let's put it that way. That's revolutionary and futuristic, which is the way I see your company.
Yeah. Well-meaning is really good because there are people who devote their lives towards helping other people. And it's totally legitimate in so many different ways. I mean, more than what meets the eye. They have great feeling towards individuals. They want to bring attention to these individuals. They want to bring resources and assets to these individuals. And that's wonderful. Anytime we recognize a fellow human who's in need and we're willing to work to provide for that need or to that need, I think is wonderful. I bring a different perspective to it only in that by some great fortune, I just turn my attention towards understanding these sorts of dysfunctions from the standpoint of design of the human and development, and constructed a whole different approach to seeing really what's taking place in a typical child or an adult, seeing what's missing in a child who is dysfunctional in some way, and then putting in place all of the things that make them typical. So really it comes from a biological insight, but I want to emphasize one aspect to this that goes farther than that. I still only see them as people. I still only see them as a me or a you or a child that I might have in my own home without these issues. I still only see them in a human light, and I still especially see them as people who are extremely valuable with incredible dignity. They become our teachers. They become the ones who flag us and say, you know what? You got it pretty good. And especially for the parents of these true loving human children and then becoming adults, who spend their every waking moment concerned about that child.
How important is it to get this addressed early on or young? Is it an important issue, or can it start at any time?
I found that it can start at any time, and sometimes it's beneficial to get them earlier, and sometimes it's less beneficial to get them earlier. And I only say that because every person's, like anybody else, every person's personality is different. Sometimes communicating with a child who hasn't had experience in growth, in childhood, is more difficult to communicate with. Sometimes they're more open because they haven't formed certain habits or preset, personalities. But in any case, I've worked with very young. I've worked with as young as 6 years old, 5 years old, and I've worked with as old as 23 years old. And each has its advantages and each has its challenges, of course, like anything else.
That's wonderful. Anyway, the particulars on that. When folks hear that you do your work out of a martial arts studio, how do you explain that? Is it imperative that they take a course in martial arts, or is it martial arts that is the foundation, the fundamental of your system or your understanding of the need for, or what you need to do to help these people?
Well, to answer the first question, how do I explain it? With great difficulty. And the reason is there's a concept of what martial arts is. And rightfully so, because martial arts is a defense system. But really, first and foremost, embedded deep in Asian history, it's really a well-being system. It has to do with the building of the person to integrate into life. I happen to have, other than an extensive background in martial arts, dating quite a few years back, my background in biomedical sciences, my interest in neurobiology, a background in philosophy and theology, And I tend to see things as a whole unit rather than symptomatically. I'm more interested in the process than I am in the outcome. So the placement of this system that I developed, Pressator, in a martial arts environment isn't really contradictory, because martial arts has to do with the processing of data from within, the mindful management of the mechanics, the movement mechanics of the self, and also the interaction of individuals outwardly. It's about a particular social behavior in one sense, and it could be bad social behavior or good social behavior. It depends on how you apply it.
So how do the body mechanics play into not altering, but aligning the brain into, to better be able to communicate like I need it right now?
Yeah.
So how is that playing?
Well, that's an extremely crucial question and a very insightful question, frankly. When you look at a child, in my opinion, at the point of birth, their mind is not really connected with the world. It's almost, if you could say, outside the world. It hasn't been connected with the world yet, and the only way it's going to be is through that individual and growth. And that's why education is so important, to really develop that mind. But before the mind can be developed, it has to be connected to the outside world, and the only way it can do it is through the body. When a child is born, they have innately programmed in their brain, as part of the miracle of life, an ability to start to express themselves in the world. And one way it happens is that they become curious about their surroundings and they start moving. And that movement actually starts to develop muscles and nerves and everything else and stimulate growth. As that body develops, it sends signals back to the brain, which interestingly starts to develop the brain, which then sets up various receptors through a field known as psychobiology of how the mind and body work together and how the mind can enter that brain. There are receptors that are known to exist in the brain for the mind to enter. And as that brain develops, the mind now connects. But one thing we see is that movement is extremely important, and movement is preset by the design of people. We don't move like dogs, we move like people. And as that movement takes place, the brain develops and opens, in areas in a particular way. And those movement mechanics really make possible for the development of the brain and therefore the mind. I know it's a very complicated answer.
No, I'm getting that the body, when it's aligned, just like anything else, when it's aligned, runs better. Just take the example of a car. The alignment of a car. If the wheels are off a little bit and they're wobbling, it's not going to be too far down the road that the car won't work. I have a sense that that's what you're talking about, aligning the body to keep the mind on track or whatever it is that it does. I get that it's important.
But I think in your analogy, and this is an extremely important part of it, that car, those wheels, even if it's developed correctly or nearly correctly, isn't going to operate well unless it's aligned with the driver.
Good point. Good point.
And so,
excellent point.
And so if the body is really not developing properly, even though anatomically it may be all complete, then that individual is not going to be able to develop the skills to connect with the road, if you will, before them.
Prestator, again, for the people who haven't seen my first two shows, which I highly recommend that you do, because for the entertainment value alone, just how much I stumbled over myself trying to get the thing rolling. In that, we did go through and explain a lot more in detail what he's talking about right now. But for the people who are just tuned in, Pressator, the word itself, what does it mean and how did you come up with it?
Okay. Can I just start out by saying masterful stumbling, by the way?
Thank you.
It really,
Thank you very
I
much.
have no problem with it, whatsoever. I was just sitting here enjoying myself
Thank you.
and getting more at ease and listening to you. But
That's my point. That was my offering.
Pressatur is a registered trademark that is a made-up word taken from the word restore, T-O-R-E, and pressa, which is the Italian word of having a grasp as in awareness. So basically, in speaking with a colleague, a dear friend and advisor of mine, once over lunch, he said to me, you really have to describe what you do. And I said, well, that's simple. I just teach awareness. And he just sort of stared at me and said he had not heard that before. And then, of course, I owned the insight and said, gee, I really ought to put something together that talks about awareness. But he was the one that pointed it out. I just did it. And Pressatur then is really restoring a grasp on awareness. And it's awareness and consciousness, conscious awareness, of course, that helps people who don't know how to learn certain things or how to restore certain things or how to implement certain things that people need first so they can mindfully then bring everything into a line with each other.
That's great. Now, I know Pressatur covers many corners of human development, and I know that you have set up segments to address certain issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how that is working? What is your mindset on that? Why did you separate out? Like, for instance, I know you have a center for for autism 18 and above. Is that it? And you have some for the younger. So I know that you have separated it out. That's just one separation. What are the other separations that you have there?
Well, let me just clarify that. Everything works off of the Pressatur system, which is a set of principles in understanding development and design, right? So we're, as part of the Pressatur group, eventually we'll be putting into place an institute for helping people walk, for understanding dysfunctional behavior and so on, an institute for adult autism, and an institute for learning in a classroom, all of which come off of the exact same principles. Although it seems like it's scattered all over the place, all of these issues are extremely important to our society. These children will be our replacement. These children have to build society. These children really are in need of being brought online from our perspective in their want. They just want to be, like any child, integrated with everything.
So it begs the question, is the current system doing enough, or is that why you're on board to make it the current system of education and medicine?
I generally state that the Pressatur group, first and foremost, is dedicated to social entrepreneurism. We're here to help society. Secondly, we're a futuristic group that will be offering, we'll have offerings that will change the landscape of healthcare and education in society. And that's what we're doing. We're already starting this. We're now gearing up to start launching many of these issues. Education, I think, is working off of a antiquated plan only because technology has taken over everybody's lives, and everything that we're planning from the past no longer applies. In fact, the only constant in our world today is things will be changing at such a rapid rate that we're only going to be keeping up with it. But who's going to be actually implementing the needs for complex problem solving? And the education that we're going to present is in preparing children who have dreams, who have hope of healing, who have hope to being part of something. You know, every child has one major question at a certain age. How do I fit into all this? And how do I get recognized for who I am? Because deep down, I know who I am.
I know your heart's in the right place. I know you deal heart to heart with these people, and we're almost out of time. So I did want to get to so many more things. I wanted to get to some of the testimonials that I have gathered, and I wanted you to talk a little bit more about Sandy and Greg and your stroke victim and your father even. But we are out of time. Would you come back?
Absolutely.
Would you give us more of that? Because I think that it's so important, the work that you're doing. And for our viewers out there, if you want to get involved at all and you want to talk a little bit more with Paul, there is a website, not a website, a email you can contact him with at the end of credits. So watch as you finish up this segment. And the next time we're going to be talking just about that. We're going to have some footage on a person who was an amputee, and I can't wait for you to just see the work he's been doing with that. So thank you very much for watching and letting us into your living room. And for now, this walk off the bike path has been done and completed. Ciao, and God bless.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.